Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the House Economic Development hearing. Today is Friday, February 2nd, 10:30 a.m. Some quick announcements in order to allow as many people to testify as possible. We've all read the testimony. If you guys would like to stand, it'd be appreciated. Also, we're continuing to use our hybrid system with Zoom and live testifiers. So I'd like to ask members on Zoom to please keep yourself muted with video off while waiting to testify after your testimony is complete. Also, if you could please turn your camera on so we can ensure that you're in fact the person who is signed up to testify. Also, please avoid any use of profanity and using any trademarked or copyrighted images in the background. Okay, today we have a few items on our agenda, starting off with HB 2028 relating to the labeling of products. Merges the Made in Hawaii with Aloha branding program with the Hawaii Made program under DBED, specifies that the Department of Attorney General should be responsible for the enforcement of the program. Repeals Made in Hawaii with Aloha program, clarifies the calculations to determine whether a non-perishable good labeled Hawaii Made or Made in Hawaii has met the requirement that at least 51% of the wholesale value of the product is added by production within the state, including operating and overhead expenses incurred and spent within the state, and appropriates funds. First up, we have DBED.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Dane Wicker, Deputy Director, DBED. We stand on our testimony supporting the intent and are available for questions. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Attorney General with comments.
Good morning, Deputy Attorney General Brian Yee. On behalf of the Department of the Attorney General, we provided comments to you. We have two concerns. First, there's no penalty provision in this law, and so it would be very difficult to enforce. The second is the appropriate penalty. We think it's an administrative penalty, and that the appropriate way to do these administrative penalties is through the subject matter department, and we have proposed language or wording for you if you so choose. Thank you.
Next, we have late testimony from Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We do apologize for our late testimony. We're providing testimony with comments. It was a difficult bill to consider. We understand the intent of combining Made in Hawaii, Hawaii Made. There is some confusion. We want to avoid the confusion. We want some consistency, so we do agree with that. Our concern is the Made in Hawaii with Aloha program. It's still under the Department of Agriculture, and we look at it as an agricultural-related branding program. So we are concerned with that disappearing. This bill is asking for that to be repealed. We would ask the committee to maybe consider keeping it, but renaming it Grown in Hawaii, which is actually part of the Made in Hawaii with Aloha program. So Grown in Hawaii program, we actually have those programs in some of the counties. The county of Maui has Maui Grown, or Grown in Maui, and Kauai County has Kauai Grown, and these are agriculture-related programs. We also do suggest that it may be more prudent to have the enforcement in one agency as it previously was. But again, our concern comes from the agriculture sector. With the provisions to allow overhead, other expenses to be included for your qualification of the 51%, there may be products that from an agricultural standpoint that wouldn't qualify, and we don't want to dilute from the agricultural standpoint the Made in Hawaii brand. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Angela Melody Young in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee. Angela Melody Young testifying in strong support. So this policy merges Made in Hawaii with Aloha program with the Hawaii Made program. It's good to distinguish the programs because also there's another similar branding called Made in Hawaii from the Hawaii Food Industry Association, which is a nonprofit organization led by a diverse board of directors. HFIA makes sure Made in Hawaii businesses not only survive and thrive in Hawaii's economic disadvantages, and the Made in Hawaii from HFIA's signature event has operated since 1995, and the passion for the event is driven by shared values of Hawaii, Made in Hawaii helps businesses to become sustainable year-round. So when we talk about marketing and branding, it's important to distinguish brands. Branding consists of logo, designs, mission, values, and the principles your brand operates from. When you've got two similar brands, people are going to get it mixed up. And when I'm reading this requirement for businesses, right, non-perishable, good labeled Hawaii made or made in Hawaii has met the requirement that at least 51% of the wholesale. This is very difficult for small business owners to grasp, and they have to struggle with business licensing, learning business law, and have to struggle with conforming the product to state law. So least restrictive business laws are going to create the most equity to help farmers that will be producing a lot of the local grown products, honey, eggs, nurseries that are producing flowers. You have to help them to be able to get their products to the farmers market with the least barriers, and laws have to help business owners get as much product as they can to the market, right? So equity is making it even in the playing field for businesses. So it's good to see government action to work with businesses. A lot of times there is a false notion that businesses have to be segregated from government and that, oh, businesses can't work with government. Like, that's a very false notion. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. And with extra late testimony, the Department of Agriculture.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I apologize for the late submission of the testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony. May I introduce staff that's here to possibly help with questions?
Sure.
That would be Brendan Akamu, current Business Development Program Manager at the department in the Market Development Branch. Okay, the Department of Agriculture offers comments on this bill. We do agree with the findings of the report that it is confusing. It would be better if the Made in Hawaii branding identity program was under one brand, which is currently the Made in Hawaii with Aloha. And we agree that if it transitions to DBET, it should be under one agency. While we also agree with another finding of the report that says enforcement should remain within the department that administers the program. It's better if the enforcement and the administration occur within the same department. That was the conclusion of the study. The other concern we have is the current members that are in the Made in Hawaii with Aloha program. We're concerned that they will be allowed to keep that logo for a while until they run out of their investment of labeling and pre-printed material and website. They already have invested in the current logo. The other concern we have is that the measure does not address if there will be a fee charged. The current program under the Department of Agriculture recognizes that it's a tribute to them because they know that manufacturing offshore is probably going to save them money, but they take the time to do their product here, and we appreciate that, and the law does not provide for a fee. Finally, the Department of Agriculture has been administering this program since 2008, I believe, but one of the things we caution is that when you use the term "made in Hawaii," that is under the jurisdiction of the Federal Trade Commission, who governs everything that's under Made in USA, and we have already received a letter from the Federal Trade Commission arguing that our logo is actually made in Hawaii with Aloha, and we have not heard back from them. So that would be something to consider if you're going to use strictly Made in Hawaii. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. That's all the people we have signed up to testify in person or on Zoom. Is there anybody wishing to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to House Bill 2762 relating to gaming. Grants a 40-year gaming license for a single integrated resort property on lands under the control of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs designated for commercial use on the island of Oahu, excluding lands west of Ko'olina. Establishes the Hawaii Gaming Commission, imposes wagering tax on gross gaming revenue, creates the Gaming Special Fund, and appropriates funds. First up, we have the Office of Hawaiian Affairs with comments.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, and a special welcome to hopefully a future member of the legislature. My name is Keopu Relitz. I am the Director of Advocacy with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We have offered comments today. You have our written comments, but just a couple of highlights. we wanted to just sort of highlight it's not even the pros and cons, but the considerations to make, right? So the need for an economic driver, where in other Native nations, that's been a huge funder of social and health services on their nations. And on the other hand, they also see some pretty significant challenges when it comes to addiction with gambling and the intersection of gaming and poverty. So we just wanted to highlight those things. Happy to have the conversation and answer any questions, but do appreciate the opportunity for the committee to think about what it looks like to have an economic driver for the Hawaiian people. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Tax Foundation of Hawaii with comments on Zoom. Not present. Okay, and next we have HPD in opposition on Zoom.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am Mike Lambert. I'm the Narcotics Spice Division Major, and HPD opposes the bill, and I am available for questions.
Thank you very much. And we have Angela Melody Young in opposition.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee. Angela Melody Young testifying in strong opposition on behalf of Kapalama Neighborhood Security Walk. So it's a hard topic to talk about, gaming. Sin City is fun. Yet there are a lot of negative things that will be brought to Hawaii if gaming and casinos are also brought to Hawaii with this law. So I walk with a neighborhood security walk Department of Hawaiian Homelands and Homestead Citizens Patrol for the last 18 years. And they have to shut down gaming rooms. And because it brings in a lot of bad activity. So because Neighborhood Security Walk is in favor of creating a safe and healthy community, we are going to be in strong opposition of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all we have signed up to testify in person or on Zoom. Is there anybody else wishing to testify on this measure? Seeing none. Members, do we have any questions? Representative Pierick.
This question is for HBD.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir, for testifying. Can you give us an overview of all the negative effects of gambling on a community?
Absolutely. So I think some of the push or perhaps the perception would be that because we already have illegal gambling, that perhaps it'd just be better to have legal gambling. The issue with that is that illegal gambling would still exist because there are people that are not going to want to participate in the taxation as well as the licensure. So those would continue. The bigger issue is the social impact. So for example, there was a Civil Beat article that cited in 1995, there was a research done by Deferred, and they said that it could generate anywhere from 47 to 104 million, and that's a 1995 standard. So when I was able to look in Minnesota, their 1995 cost for social services related to gambling addiction was about 228 million annually. So and there's other studies from the UNLV, the Institute of International Gaming Institute, that shows that a lot of times the social impacts are upwards of 4 times what the state would expect to get in taxation. So for me, it's the social impacts that are going to happen. And then, of course, we already have to deal with poverty, which then leads to crime and so on and so forth.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to just follow up on that line of questioning. How many game rooms do we currently have in operation on the island of Oahu?
Last year, at the beginning of the year, we had anywhere from about 100. And the reason why I say about is because they kind of open and close, and that's how they try to evade us. So they're open for a few days, close, open for a few days. And what they're trying to do is hope that we can build a strong case against them. We were able to be pretty successful, and we actually closed over 20 this calendar year. So the short answer is 80-ish. And the reason I want to give you guys the background on the beginning of the year is that we are making strides with the current legislation, and we definitely don't want to have any more influences that are hurting the community.
Thank you. It seemed 3 years ago we had the same discussion, and the same amount of game rooms were in operation then. So I know it's a difficult task you guys have. Do you know about how much money you guys spend to actively try to shut these things down and enforcement around the game rooms?
I'd have to get an actual number, but just to let you know, we have 8 full-time investigators. So what their salary would be, plus they do incur some overtime. So if I had to, just off the cuff, we usually spend about $1 million. And that includes their staffing, overtime, and other related costs to that enforcement. So it's pretty expensive to tackle these issues.
So if we were to have $5 million to attack this issue, would we make more progress in shutting down some of these game rooms and getting rid of these problems that are currently existing all around our island?
In regards to the legal game rooms, the bigger issue is we just don't have the personnel. So if $5 million went to incentive bonuses for people to become officers, then potentially, but just if you guys were to carve out $5 million, we'd probably just burn out the 8 investigators we have. So yes and no, it could definitely help. Resources do help, and I appreciate the idea, but yeah, we're limited by our ability to actually get out there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Majority Leader.
I have a question for OHA. I was just wondering, the commercial lands that OHA now owns, where are they? It would not include, I guess this bill excludes lands west of Ko'olina,
Yes,
but within, on the island of Oahu.
sure.
What are those areas, are the big chunks of?
So the lands are Iwilei and Hakuone or Kaka'akamokai. So those are the ones that would be in play currently, as that's assuming we're going with our current stock of land.
Right, okay. Thank you.
I have some questions for OHA. So we've had an ongoing discussion, or however you want to characterize it, about city land revenues and how short the state is in funding. Could you remind us how much you guys currently get and what the estimate is if we were to get the 20% of city land revenues?
I would have to check on that, so I would appreciate the grace, given that I have a lot of things in my mind and I'm only about 2 months in, so I have to get the specific number. But my understanding is, from as far as what we are getting now versus what we should be getting, assuming if we were to get the full no cap, we're getting, and if we're correcting some of the actual public land trust revenue, like the lands that should be included in it, we're only getting about 3 to 5% by one of what we're owed. So something more along the lines of over 50 to 100 million that we should be getting per year annually, as opposed to some 15 to 20 million now.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any further questions? Yes, Representative Pierick.
Thank you for testifying.
Sure.
So we're going to draw a parallel and then ask for you to show the distinctions and how the Hawaiians are different. So like in the mainland of America, we've got Native Americans who they're allowed to gamble on their property, and oftentimes the Native Americans to some extent are poor because they're believing that they have this break of, if I just gamble one more time, I'll get this big break and I'll have more money, and then they keep getting sucked into that low statistically benefiting game of gambling, and it's like a spiral downwards. If you visit certain camps in Native American areas, they're not doing great. Some of the gambling owners are doing great, but the vast majority of them, they're not doing great, even though the funds go towards their school and medical services. How would Hawaii be different than that?
So there's a number of differences. First, largely speaking, the native tribes and nations that have gaming are either state or federally recognized with a governing entity that is recognized separate and apart from the state or the federal government. And so in Hawaii, Hawaiians have state recognition, but we don't have a formal government-to-government relationship that is the exact same. We have OHA, which is the holding component for the Native Hawaiian governing entity. So that's one difference. Another difference is that Hawaii or Hawaiians were never sort of literally removed from their lands, and there's a different there's the history of complete dispossession of land and literal removal of land from their land is very different. And so, in my experience, having worked in Indigenous law and politics, there is sort of the true disposition of land is in a complete sense, and the true removal is very likely the ways in which many of those people will talk about the impacts to economic and health. And so that is very different from Hawaii. What I will say, though, is if you look at some of the studies when it comes to gaming, and this is why we wanted to offer comments, that it is a very complex issue. I think in the first 10 to 15 years of Indian gaming, past the Indian Gaming Act, they showed that the health outcomes for kids in particular in nations that had gaming were actually significantly improved. There hasn't been a ton of studies since that, but it sort of shows that it's not it's not as simple as this or that. The other, I think, component to remember is that when you look to the ways in which gambling or gaming overlaps with poverty, right? So that, I think, to your point, that's regardless of race. And that's regardless of political classification as a governing entity, as Hawaiians or Native Americans would have if they were a federally recognized or state recognized organization. And so in that case, we're looking less as far as the people and the political class that the American Indian tribes that have gaming are, and more along the lines that it does tend to impact those who are in poverty more because of the stresses of trying to meet sort of that minimum to get by. So in that respect, I just want to highlight that there is sort of not a ton of difference actually in that the component of poverty is something that cuts across, whether that's in Hawaii or that's in elsewhere, and it actually cuts across Native people. It's not just Native folks who have that, where we see that intersection. It's across the board when we talk about ethnicity and ancestry.
Thank you. I appreciate you mentioning how poverty doesn't have racial boundaries. If we look at the mainland of America, there are a lot of Native Americans who are disproportionately poor. And if we look at the state of Hawaii, there's a lot of Native Hawaiians who are disproportionately poor compared to the other ethnicities here. I see a connection there if we're trying to legalize gambling here. So any reassurance to us how we can make Native Hawaiians not disproportionately poor by legalizing gambling in Hawaii?
I mean, I know Representative or Chair Holt had mentioned it, increasing the share that Office of Hawaiian Affairs or our Native Hawaiian governing entity has from the pro rata share, so that we actually can put those investments back into our community. I think the study that is for the first 10 to 15 years, in which they could easily draw the line between, pre-gaming and gaming in a Native nation, and the fact that there were significant improvements to children's health, is something that shows that, it's not, when done carefully, when ensuring that the proceeds are going to go to the services that will impact and keep Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians. I mean, so one of the things is that there will be things to consider on the impacts that may be seen as negative for non-Hawaiians. There may be positive impacts, and if you see in California tribes, many of the California tribes are required to give money straight back to their locality, and so in that respect, you see a lot of when the money is used and when there are sort of agreements that are reached, which I don't see why that wouldn't be the case with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, where there are agreements that are reached where the money will be put back into services. I will say that, the money that we have requested for our budget last biennium, all of that or nearly all of that is going straight back into the Native Hawaiian community and into our community. So in that respect, we do have a track record of ensuring that public dollars that we use are going back into the community. Whether or not that gives you the full assurance that you need, I'm not sure, but I do want to sort of give you the track record and also show you sort of the complexities and the different amalgamations in which other states on the continental U.S. have ensured that monies are going to the communities, native and non-native, in a way that actually sort of benefits and also addresses and mitigates any of the harms proactively.
Thank you for the reassurance. Kanaka are still disproportionately poor in our state, even with all those resources.
Right.
Thank you.
I have another question, sorry.
Sure.
OHA was created with intention, for the betterment of Native Hawaiians. And in your guys' testimony, you note that gaming revenues have increased from 2012 to 2022 from $14 billion to $40 billion. And in the estimates in 2021, this measure would increase your guys' funds by over $50 million for the betterment of Native Hawaiians, which could probably alleviate some of the concerns that the representative from Kunia has. But do you guys have any other plans to raise $50 million a year, or have you heard any proposals that would fund OHA to the tune of $50 million additional dollars a year?
Not that I have heard.
Thank you.
Not currently, I should say.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I do have a question. Just to clarify the use of the funds, it sounds like there's some language in here about helping compulsive gamblers to deal with their issues, training Native Hawaiians for jobs, roads and other improvements. Is the intent then to use the funds would go to OHA for implementation of all your other programs?
OHA was not a part of the writing of the bill, so I think for us it would be carrying out the will of the legislature. So if that is the intent, I think that proactively that is aligned with what OHA's strategic plans would be, and that we would make sure that we are, I think when we look at the best practices of other Native nations, that is by and large what those funds are being used for. And so when we look at that, the intention, I could say that would be very much what my recommendation is, and what we would have to put in front of our board to have that discussion.
Sorry, just to let you know, there are some amendments that I intend to make to clarify that the funds go to the Office of Hawaiian
Yeah.
Affairs for their purposes.
I didn't see that in here. Okay, thanks.
Any further questions on this measure, members? If not, thank you very much.
Thank
We're
you.
moving on to our next measure. HB 2765 relating to sports wagering allows for the regulation of sports wagering by DBED, establishes licensing requirements for sports wagering operators and sports wagering suppliers, specifies that sports wagering shall not be considered games of chance or gambling. First up, we have Department of Taxation with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Teresa Zetwick on behalf of the Department of Taxation. We stand on our written comments, offering comments, and are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have DBED with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Dane Wicker, Deputy Director of DBED. We stand on our testimony offering comments. We do note that DBED is not a regulatory agency. However, we do support a regulatory process behind this if this bill moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have DraftKings in support on Zoom.
Good morning, Chair Holt and members of the Economic Development Committee. My name is Rebecca London, representing DraftKings, a digital sports entertainment and gaming company, and we're the leading online sports betting companies in the country. I testify today in support of HB 2765. You have my complete remarks, but I would like to highlight 2 points from those remarks. First is that regulated gaming companies take responsible play seriously. We're regularly innovating to provide for our players with all of our players with tools to ensure that sports wagering continues to be a form of entertainment. And secondly, to highlight that a reasonable tax and fee structure creates a market in which regulated operators can easily enter, innovate, and compete while working to eradicate the illegal market. Thank you very much for your time today and consideration of this measure. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. And we have the Sports Betting Alliance in support on Zoom.
Sure. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Kathleen Owen, and I'm an attorney with the law firm Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe. Thank you so much for your time on this bill. I'm here today on behalf of my clients, the Sports Betting Alliance, which I will refer to as the SBA. I have submitted written testimony on behalf of the SBA, and you just heard from one of our members, Rebecca London with DraftKings. FanDuel, BetMGM, and Fanatics are also members. I want to quickly highlight just a few items adding on to Ms. London's testimony. I want to start by emphasizing that sports betting is already happening in Hawaii. An estimated $277 million is wagered annually in Hawaii. This money is being wagered by residents with unregulated, illegal offshore websites and with illegal bookies where there is no oversight, no consumer protection, and no revenue generated for the state. Where sports betting is legalized, reputable national operators enter the market and provide robust measures with regard to identity and age verification, responsible gaming, gaming integrity, and more, none of which is present in the unregulated illegal market. Under this bill, to qualify to operate in Hawaii, operators must already offer sports wagering in at least 3 jurisdictions in the United States, pursuant to a state regulatory structure. This ensures that Hawaii's operators are experienced and reputable national companies, such as members of the SBA. And where sports betting is legalized, it's regulated, it's transparent and accountable, and the state is able to tax the activity and generate significant revenue. Thank you again for your time. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much. Next, we have HPD in opposition. Not present. And that's all the people we have signed up to testify in person or on Zoom. Is there anybody else wishing to testify on this measure? Seeing
Yes,
none,
I will testify. Is it okay, Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. Angela Melody Young, testifying in strong opposition on behalf of Kapalama Neighborhood Security Walk, a grassroots of Honolulu Police Department. And we are in strong opposition because we should not enable gambling in Hawaii. You don't have to make something legal just because it's illegal and people are about it. So it diminishes the work of the kapunas of the Native Hawaiian beneficiaries from DHHL that have a thriving 18-year operation of the Kanahili Homestead Citizens Patrol. And they, if you've heard them testify yesterday in the Senate, they are not about creating more gambling and bad activity in the community. And I'm sure that they will testify to oppose this because
Sorry, could you please stick to your own testimony and not testify on behalf of others? Thank you.
Okay, so Kapalama Neighborhood Security Walk gets trained by the DHHL Kanahili Homestead Citizens Patrol. That's why it's relatable. So yeah, we're just in strong opposition because in terms of safety, we cannot support gambling. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, questions? Representative Pierce.
This question is for Rebecca London.
Good afternoon, Representative.
Hey there. So I'd like to read to you some testimony from HPD, and then can you provide reassurance how this won't happen in our state if we legalize gambling? Okay. HPD writes this in the testimony. The HPD believes that all forms of gambling are associated with a great amount of social ills and financial ruin for many people. Gambling greatly affects a person's job, family, and overall life. Additionally, gambling creates a substantial negative impact on public safety and welfare in our community. Numerous studies have confirmed that gambling causes problems such as bankruptcy, theft, embezzlement, suicide, child abuse, and neglect, divorce, incarceration, and homelessness. I have a doctorate degree in counseling, 4 certificates in suicide prevention, and many studies show that gambling can be an ill in somebody's mental health. What assurances do you have from your group that this is false and what you guys are saying is true?
Thank you very much for the question, Representative. What I mentioned in my testimony is that, as I said, especially tech companies, we take a lot of pride in observing our users' patterns and being able to intervene before it becomes an issue. We really stress that the word is responsible gaming, and that responsible gaming is for everyone, that it's a form of entertainment, not as something that leads them down the paths that you were just describing. We also, in this bill, provide funding for additional support for the small subset of the population that does struggle and needs additional resources. So we take pride in being able to partner with states and with the National Council on Problem Gaming to make sure that those that do need those resources have them available, while also introducing all of our players to different tools that allow them to play within their own means and to make sure that sports wagering is for entertainment and nothing beyond that.
Thank you. So to clarify, with our economy being very terrible, interest rates being high, people being poor, your answer is that we're going to create rules so that poor people don't use this tool as an avenue to stay in poverty.
Can you repeat your question, Representative?
You're saying that regulation is going to protect poor people from staying poor by gambling.
Well, so we employ tools that allow folks to wager within their means. You can set daily, weekly, monthly limits for both deposit and wager amounts. And we really encourage our users to use those so that way they can have some skin in the game, but they're not playing beyond their means. So it's not just the regulatory side of things, it's also the good actor side of things in terms of the regulated gaming companies. We care about our customers, and because of that, we offer them tools to make sure that they're gaming within their means.
Thank you.
Representative Nakamura.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for the Sports Betting Alliance.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Rebecca. I wanted to ask you, in other states, what department regulates gaming?
I think I can better refer to Ms. London on that.
Okay.
Thanks. So it really depends on the state and their structure. What we've seen is some states, it's under their lottery, some states it's under their Department of Gaming. I'm aware that Hawaii doesn't currently have those sorts of departments, which is why we proposed this structure. But there are also states that have it outside of traditional gaming regulatory bodies. So it is possible, and especially because Hawaii is not a first mover on this, it has the guidance of other states, could really look at other regulatory bodies for guidance on establishing that regulatory structure.
And then what can be done to, if we legalize sports gaming, what can be done to prevent illegal sports gaming?
Yeah, that's a great question, Representative. I appreciate that. Because legal sports wagering is now codified and there would be criminal penalties for illegal sports wagering, it enables law enforcement to have that additional enforcement mechanism to go after illegal sports wagering. And it, with the additional resources from the bill, with the tax revenue, then it could be allocated towards those uses.
Is that how this bill, I'm sorry, I haven't seen that section, but is that the intent, is to use revenues for enforcement of illegal wagering?
So I believe right now there is just funding to the general fund, but neither DraftKings nor the Sports Betting Alliance takes a position on where the funding goes. That's we fully believe that is a a priority of the state and that we should have no say in where those revenues are allocated.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
Vice Chair.
This question's for DBED. So you folks mentioned that you folks are not the regulatory entity. Do you have any recommendations of who that entity could be then?
We would need to explore with some of our sister departments, possibly Department of Attorney General, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, but we have not had those discussions to my knowledge yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to ensure the committee and the public that my intentions for these measures are not to keep poor people poor, and it is to provide, our tourism revenues are flat. It's to provide tourists another option to come and spend their money here so the state can, receive tax revenues. Also, the Office of Foreign Affairs is not receiving a fair share of their funds. So these are just looking at different options for additional revenues for our state. So I do appreciate the questions, but I just want to ensure you that that is definitely not my intention. And any more questions on these measures? Seeing none, we'll be moving on. HB 2369, relating to the Hawaii Community-Based Economic Development Technical and Financial Assistance Program. Amend sections 210D-10 HRS to increase the maximum interest rate on community-based economic development loans to 10%. And our first and only testimony, DBID.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members, Dan Wicker, Deputy Director at DBED. This is a housekeeping measure. It ties and aligns with the federal rate that we have to keep in our rules. This is an up to, it's not setting it as the new rate. So for consideration that we follow the rules with the feds, thank you. And I do have our Administrator, Dennis Ling, Business Development Support Division, who administers a program available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other testifiers signed up. Anybody else wishing to testify on this measure? Seeing none, members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to our last measure, House Bill 2354. Oh, did you have a question? Oh, sorry. House Bill 2354 relating to the Small Business Regulatory Review Board clarifies that Small Business Regulatory Review Board has authority to review legislation affecting small businesses in response to a request from a small business owner. First up, DBED.
Committee, thank you, Dan Wicker, Deputy Director, DBED. We stand on our testimony in support, and I do have our Small Business Regulatory Review Board Administrator, Dori Palkovich, available for any questions. Thank you.
And Angela Melody Young in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES in strong support. So we've got a lot of small business owners. CARES is very supportive of this policy to help support small businesses, products made in Hawaii, products locally grown from farmers, ranchers, and nurseries. CARES wants to help support the creation of equitable and non-restrictive policy to support the small business industry. So within this policy, the board may consider requests from small business owners for review of any rule proposed, amended, or adopted by a state office, or for review of legislation affecting small businesses. I think this is a good idea. If small business owners have got a proposal, this policy backs it up and actually takes it into consideration to enact business ideas. So policymakers talk about policies to give money to the middle-class families and to create economic advantages and opportunities, and it's not a difficult problem to solve. People in Hawaii love food. Hawaiians love food. If you give opportunities to these families to have farmers market at schools and shopping centers, Kapilani Farmers Market has got like 80 local vendors with fresh produce, Hawaii-made products, and lots of locally owned food booths. So getting ideas from the small businesses proposed is a really good policy. Cutting policy that's oppressive on businesses is good, and copying models with existing thriving business structures is also a good idea. And also, when we talk about tourism and economic development, to make sure that it's aligned with one another, the strategic goals. When you look at HTA's 2020 to 2025
Sorry,
strategic
this bill
plan.
has nothing to do with HTA.
Hello?
Hi, this bill does not relate to HTA?
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to testify on this measure? Members, any questions? Representative LaChico.
you, Chair. Question for the Small Business Regulatory Review Board. Aloha.
Good morning. I'm Dory Palkovich. I'm the administrator of the board.
Yeah, just wanted to ask about what type of scenarios this would apply to be able to assist our small businesses. And in relation to that, a lot of our small business owners have some immigrant background or come from, limited English proficiency, have those kinds of challenges. Does the board currently have the capacity for, small businesses such as those that may not understand how legislation applies to them? Like, do you have language access, or do you have some type of, folks are able to kind of assist with certain business owners that experience those challenges?
Thank you for that question. We haven't run into that situation before, but if we do, we will look into it. And the reason why this bill came about was because small businesses came to the board last year after the legislative session, and they wanted the board's support. Our deputy AG had a concern with the statute, so basically it's just clarifying that the board will help support when it has to do with legislation.
So in your current capacity right now, you have not encountered small business owners who come from the background that I had just mentioned?
I have not yet, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? Representative Kong.
How often do you meet?
We meet once a month, usually the third Thursday of the month.
And because they're all from different islands, you have a funding for that, or do they just by phone?
We do have funding, and the neighbor island board members don't always come to the meeting, but we go through Zoom, so they'll attend it virtually.
I had a problem reaching you folks in the past. How does one contact you, actually?
We have a website, and it's connected to the DBED's website. It's the Small Business Regulatory Review Board website. We have phone numbers. We have emails. We have brochures.
Okay, we'll try to find a way, but thank you. Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
To appease our vice chair, we're going to go back to the first measure on the bill. She has a
Sorry.
question.
Dane, sorry, this is for you. So since the other departments recommended enforcement in the same agency, I just wanted to see, you asked for 200K and 1 FTE for this to be coordinated, but would that also include enforcement?
Give me 1 second. Did we capture enforcement?
Thank you, Vice Chair Dennis Ling with Business Development and Support Division. DBED would have to work very closely with the Attorney General's office because, as the Deputy Director said, we are not a regulatory or enforcement agency.
Right.
But in order to make sure that things are copacetic, we would have to work very closely with the Attorney General's office. Now, the Attorney General's office would require us to pay for investigators or others who may help us to take this to the point where we need to work with a manufacturer that's not compliant.
That's interesting because their testimony recommends that the enforcement be within your agency too. So I just wanted to see what that cost would be if there was to be an enforcement on your end.
Yeah, they did not say, and I think it would be in their measure, something to the effect that should they be involved with enforcement, it would cost this dollar amount.
I see.
And, so because the measure doesn't put enforcement upon us, we didn't include that part in the 200,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're at the conclusion of our hearing today. So the intent of the chair is to do decision-making on these measures next week, Wednesday, at the end of our hearing. So we're going to have a hearing next week, Wednesday, to take up some additional measures. So this will be posted on that hearing notice, and we will do decision-making next week, Wednesday, at our economic development hearing. So thank you guys very much. Have a nice day.